Since the release of the DLC, and especially lately, it's been harder and harder to engage with Elden Ring. Shadow of the Erdtree wasn't exactly the revitalization many hoped for, especially when it came to multiplayer. With each passing day, matchmaking is taking longer and longer as the player base dwindles, and without substantial patch support, that trend is one way. Which, of course, makes sense. Elden Ring in general is not a game designed for long-term enjoyment. It can be played and replayed as much as you like, but once you've finished a playthrough, there's little incentive to continue. Multiplayer and mods are your best bets if you want to keep playing, but those things are dependent on community. This week has been particularly tough for a lot of people for what I'll assume are fairly obvious reasons, so I wanted to focus on how we, as players and as people, can actually enjoy our time. My last couple videos have been centered around ways From Software could work on player retention in future titles, things they could implement to make long-term development more viable or, at the very least, improve replayability. And the reception was fairly mixed. A lot of people want the same things I want, like improved multiplayer and better post-launch content updates. And a lot of people think games like Elden Ring should only focus on a short-term, single-player experience. But even where those groups differ, they are part of the same community. We all enjoy the same game for a huge overlap of reasons, so even when we like different aspects of them, we have plenty of common ground. And that's where community efforts shine. Seamless co-op isn't perfect, but it is my favorite example of what a mod can be. Something receptive to its player base that's looking to improve a core experience. Millions of people just wanted to play with their friends without constant friction, balance be damned. Giving them that option while trying to retain the integrity of the gameplay is a noble goal, and it's clearly had a profound impact. I was hesitant when the mod launched and didn't have support for invasions, as they are core to my enjoyment, but sure enough, invasions eventually made their way in. It's not a flawless implementation, but it's rooted in solid player feedback and trying to deliver a cohesive experience. In fact, as a mod, it has been so successful that people largely consider it the default way to play on PC. That's huge for something you would think of as otherwise incredibly niche. But that is representative of just how strong the multiplayer community is in these games. That FromSoft has made some missteps by not being more considerate of a multiplayer experience, and that there's a lot of room for improvement. Not to say they need to fundamentally change their design or anything. I'm all for Souls games prioritizing an isolating experience, and I'd be pretty irritated if single player wasn't a viable playstyle. Just that they should be more comprehensive with how they factor in multiplayer to that equation. Because if Seamless Co-op has taught us anything about Elden Ring's design issues, it's that treating multiplayer as solely optional content maybe isn't the most thoughtful approach. It's a tough thing to say where exactly the balance should lie, but I can say with confidence that multiplayer being all or nothing and having no in-game reason to engage with the system isn't a very inviting solution. I don't know if I would have ever gotten into PvP if it had never been thrust upon me. My first consistent invasions were as a Blue Sentinel in Dark Souls 2, where I was eager to exact revenge on the vile Red Menace. Without randomly being invaded and mercilessly taken to task, the inspiration to do so may have never occurred. And without that inspiration, I would have never come to understand and embrace being a Red myself. In that way, Souls PvP so uniquely and subtly shaped my journey as it did for so many others. I get a lot of people don't want the games to require or even encourage multiplayer for a bunch of different reasons, but I've got to make my case and say that if FromSoft actually focused on intertwining the experience and alleviating common points of friction, there's no reason to see single player and multiplayer as mutually exclusive game modes. Because multiplayer is a core part of the Souls community. These games are better for letting you share the road, and mods like Seamless Co-op have proven that there is demand for embracing that philosophy. Its potential should not be squandered. And beyond mods, there are player-organized communities. Groups that set their own rules and schedules, organize tournaments, and find new ways to play. Those communities can keep a game alive indefinitely and foster a deeper appreciation. My personal growth as a player only really began when I started rapidly prototyping builds with friends. I could brute force my way through any PvE encounter by way of trial and error, and I could get lucky in PvP, but actually learning to optimize changed how I approached the game. Having people to bounce ideas off and figure out what works and what doesn't is so much more beneficial than just looking up builds on YouTube or doing whatever the most upvoted post suggests. Imitation without understanding has probably done more damage to the perception of Souls PvP than janky netcode ever could. And learning to play better led me to spend months organizing tournaments for friends back in Dark Souls 3 after activity had slowed, and I can assure you it's an absolute blast. There's nothing quite like making up an arbitrary set of rules based on what your friends find most entertaining about a game and actually being able to play in that reality. It's all the fun of tabletop, but it's a video game so people don't have to read or do math. Win-win. And it's important to get away from the standard modes of play from time to time because Souls games, and particularly Elden Ring, can be oppressive to play as intended, especially if you want to PvP. Ganking is too easy and too boring without a 6-player limit or covenants, and invading is too exhausting for the same reasons. You can find sweet spots, but as the game ages, they become fewer and farther between. And I can't say I've met anyone who sincerely appreciates the level of spam Elden Ring encourages while on the receiving end. There are always things you can do about it, but your options can narrow a playstyle to the point of disinterest, so it's important to figure out what you find most engaging and how to best replicate that experience. I have people in comments bring up ideas for all types of organization, and there's no shortage of interesting ways to play a game with as much build variety as Elden Ring, but those efforts need to be active and enticing to have lasting power. So I encourage you to experiment with the game and reach out to your friends to do the same. Find ways you want to play together if, like me, it's one of the only games you have any real interest in playing. If you're feeling adventurous, reach out and find an existing community. Discord is a hell of a tool when it comes to social organizing, and the world is a lot bigger than your immediate friend group. As for my part, I'm considering different options for how I want to invest my time going forward. I've had some good pitches brought to me, and I'm heavily considering starting a Discord of my own. If that's the sort of thing you'd be interested in, let me know in the comments. It'd be primarily Souls-focused, but if people are nice, I'd love to share my TTRPG hobby and facilitate other media interests. Overall, I want to encourage positive community engagement and help people entertain themselves in these dire times. As far as I'm concerned, the earliest news we'll get about a new Souls game would be summer of next year, and I suspect it'll be much further out than that. In fact, I'd say we have at least 4 years of a very dark reality to contend with, and if we don't band together, we'll either die horribly, or possibly just be forced to play other games we don't really care for. A fate worse than death. So let me know where your community interests lie. Are you an invader still fighting the good fight, or have you abandoned Elden Ring for greener pastures? Perhaps you're too paralyzed by fear to experience joy at all and just need something, anything, to distract you from crushing existential dread. In any case, I promise there are people who share in both your optimism and woe. All you need to do is reach out. And please, take care of yourselves and each other because this is all we have. Until next time, thank you for watching.